Hi everyone, welcome to this first episode of the Linux for PHP YouTube channel. We're so happy to have you here. In this episode, we're going to be talking about what is Linux for PHP and how it can be useful to you in your everyday job as a PHP developer. So please stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome to this first episode of the Linux for PHP YouTube channel. We're really happy that you're there. So we'll be talking about Linux for PHP, a Docker container made with PHP in mind. So what does that mean exactly? Well, let's dig in. So what is Linux for PHP? Well, it's a lightweight version of Linux with all the software needed to easily compile and or use any version of PHP. It uses cutting-edge technology, so that means that it's built with the most recent versions of all the underlying software needed to run PHP, making it a cutting-edge software infrastructure for your PHP code. It can be easily customized to suit your every need. You want to run a CMS, a framework, a debugging session, a profiling session, Linux for PHP offers it all. So, what are the origins of Linux for PHP? Well, it dates back to an article written by the great Cal Evans himself in August 2016, where Cal was mentioning that he wanted to find an easy way to test his PHP code against the most recent version of that time, which was 7.2. In this article, he mentioned that he finally chose Alpine Linux because it had the smallest footprint. But he also mentioned that it was pointed out to him that Alpine was not necessarily the best choice because of its C compiler. So what's up with Alpine? Well, Alpine uses a version of the libc library which is named Muzzle. Muzzle is not compatible with glibc. Moreover, it uses BusyBox. Although BusyBox is a comprehensive set of programs to run a Linux system, it remains impaired in functionality. So when you start combining non-standard libraries with some compiler switches, well, you're sort of asking for issues. This is where Linux for PHP comes in. Linux for PHP offers a standard toolchain compiled from scratch. All compilation decisions are taken according to what suits PHP best. Compiler switches for all software and libraries are chosen with hardware compatibility in mind. And most downloadable images of Linux for PHP weigh around 500 megabytes. We have very short release cycles every 6 months, and we have up-to-date libraries. And of course, thanks to Docker, we are cross-platform compatible. So this brings us to the use cases. Well, what's important now is to know how Linux for PHP is going to be useful to you in your everyday job as a PHP developer. Well, first of all, it allows you to compile any recent version of PHP in order to test your code against it. If we have a look at the documentation, which is available on the linuxforphp.net website, you will see that using Linux for PHP is very easy. First of all, you need to install Docker, of course. According to whatever OS you're using, you just follow the instructions and usually it's fairly straightforward. Once Docker is installed, you can easily start using Linux for PHP simply by entering a run command with the Linux for PHP identifier. Each version of Linux for PHP corresponds to the PHP version that's running inside the container. So if we go onto the Laravel news website, I see this very interesting article that's mentioned that type properties are coming to PHP 7.4 with a few code examples. Well, it might be interesting to copy and paste those code examples and run it inside a Linux for PHP Docker container. So let's copy and paste the code here. So if I look at my code here, I see that I have type properties. This would be a parse error if I run it against any other version of PHP than 7.4. But 7.4 is not available, right? Well, wrong. It is already available on the development branch of the PHP code repository, and Linux for PHP actually offers a version of the 7.4.0dev version of PHP, which means I can run this inside Linux for PHP. So let's run it. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to invoke Docker and ask for the Linux for PHP image. As you can see, I'm asking for the 7.4.0dev version. This will allow me to run whatever code is inside my present working directory and serve it inside the Linux for PHP container. So let's run the code. Now if I go to my browser, I can see that now on port 8181 I'm getting an answer where I see my script, which contains the code that I copied and pasted from the Laravel news website. So if I click on it, I see that I'm not getting a parse error. I'm actually using the new type properties of PHP 7.4. Now that's really cool to test your code against the next version of PHP that's not even released yet. Linux for PHP allows you to easily test any PHP script against any PHP version. That's the beauty of it. You can also easily profile any script with Blackfire IO because it is available inside all Linux for PHP containers. Let's give an example. So let's run a container that will be available on port 8282. This time I'm going to run it in interactive mode, and I'm going to ask for the bin bash program, which will give me a shell. Once I have my shell inside my container, I can actually run the LfPHP get command and ask for Blackfire IO. Now if you want more information on the LfPHP get command that's available inside the Linux for PHP container, you can add the -- list option to the command in order to know what are the available packages that you can run. You can also read the Linux for PHP documentation, of course. We have an entire section on the LfPHP get command. We also have a cookbook section in our documentation. This section gives you many examples on how to use the LfPHP get command. In our case, we'll be asking for Blackfire. So let's run LfPHP get Blackfire. It will ask you for the server ID and the server token. Then it will ask you for the client ID and the client token. After a few moments, Blackfire is actually available on your web server. In order to demonstrate Blackfire, we will simply profile a script that's running the PHP info function. And then go to your browser. And there it is. You have your PHP version 7.2.12. Once you scroll down, that it is indicated that it is running Blackfire. If I click on the profile script, it will run the profiling session. And from there you can get the information on the execution time, the memory consumption, and you can actually go to the call graph and see how everything went. Pretty cool. Okay, now let's say that you want to install WordPress. Now usually installing a CMS takes a little bit of time. With Linux for PHP, nothing is as simple as installing a CMS or a framework. So this time we're going to run another Linux for PHP container that will be running on port 8383. Now there's a little secret that's written in the Linux for PHP documentation, but that you might not have noticed. If you share your present working directory inside the container in the folder srvtempo, all the code that is installed inside this folder will be automatically sent back to your host computer, therefore allowing you to modify the code. So in our case, this is what we're going to do. So we're going to install it inside our present working directory. So if we go to that present working directory now, we will see that we have our index file that we've just profiled with Blackfire, and we have our type properties that we tested against PHP 7.4. To install a CMS, we will be using the LfPHP get command again. If we ask for the list option once more, you will see that in this list we have an item named CMS, and we have another item named PHP frameworks. This is how you can install any CMS or any framework using the LfPHP get command. So let's run this command now and ask for a CMS. Now the script is telling me which CMS do you wish to install. The choices are Concrete 5, Drupal, Joomla, or WordPress. In our case, we will install WordPress. So we will give it the option 4. A few moments later, the database is already set up and the application is ready to go. So if I go to that port, as you can see, I am getting the WordPress installation set up. From there, I would just enter the credentials to the database and I would be ready to run WordPress inside my Linux for PHP container. Now that was fast. Now if we go back inside our folder, we see that the WordPress folder was created, thus allowing us to add this to PHP Storm or any other IDE and start modifying the source code. Pretty cool. So let's finish it off by installing a framework. We will use the LfPHP get command again, and this time we will ask for PHP frameworks. As you can see, we have a list of PHP frameworks that we can install. For today, we'll be choosing number 4, which is Laravel. We give it a name. Once everything is downloaded, the database is also ready to go, and we have the user, the password, and the name of the database. Laravel is already running and waiting for us on the desired port. If we go back to our browser and we go to localhost 8484, you see Laravel is already waiting. And if you want to modify the source code, as you can see now inside our folder, as we did with WordPress previously, we now have a test folder, and inside this test folder we have all the Laravel files that we can modify. Again, that was pretty fast. So basically, after having seen and done all of this, we can say that you are only one command away from running PHP anywhere, anytime, and even better, running any CMS, framework, or PHP code in any version at any time, only with a few commands and a few clicks. Now that's pretty good. Hope it will be useful to you all. Thank you for watching this first episode. Follow us on Twitter at LinuxForPHP. Our website is linuxforphp.net. Follow our live events on Twitch TV, and please help us out, become a patron. It's always appreciated. See you next time.